Today, we're going to dissect the anatomy of a massive national-level cyber heist. We're diving deep into the official report on Singapore's biggest ever data breach. It's a story that's got it all: sophisticated spies, a month of missed clues, and some hard-learned lessons that would change the country's approach to security forever. So let's set the scene. What exactly happened here? Back in 2018, Singapore's largest healthcare group, Singhealth, got hit. And this wasn't just any cyber attack. The official inquiry called it an attack of, quote, unprecedented scale and sophistication. The attackers got their hands on the personal data of 1.5 million patients. Now, to put that number in perspective for you, that's more than a quarter of Singapore's entire population at the time. A staggering number. The type of data they took is really important here. For most of those 1.5 million people, it was their basic personal info, names, ID numbers, addresses, birthdays. But for about 159,000 of them, the attackers went a step further, grabbing their outpatient medication records. And here's the thing, this was no random data smash and grab. The report makes it absolutely clear that the attackers were laser-focused on one person. The Prime Minister's personal data and his medication records were, and I'm quoting the report directly here, specifically targeted and repeatedly accessed. This wasn't just a data breach anymore. It was a full-blown national security event. To really understand the stakes, you just have to see how the committee itself described this information. They called it the crown jewels of the network. I mean, that says it all, right? This is the most sensitive data a healthcare system has, and the attackers went straight for it. So you have to ask, who could pull something like this off? Well, the investigation concluded this was not the work of some ordinary hacker. They were hunting a ghost in the machine. The report identified the attacker as an Advanced Persistent Threat Group, or an APT. Now, these aren't lone wolves coding in a basement. APTs are highly sophisticated, they're well-funded, and very often they're state-sponsored. Their whole game is stealth. They don't just break in, they quietly move in and stick around for the long haul. And when you look at the committee's profile of this specific APT group, you can see 4 key things. First, they had a crystal clear goal. Second, they used advanced, custom malware designed to stay hidden. Third, they were unbelievably persistent, lurking inside the network for over 10 months before they made their big move. And finally, they were well-resourced. This was a complex, long-term operation. Now, an attacker like that might sound totally unstoppable. But this is where the story takes a fascinating and critical turn. The report shows there was this crucial window, a period of almost a month, where the whole attack could have been stopped in its tracks. Let's look at the attacker's timeline first. It's just brutally efficient. Between June 27th and July 4th, just 1 week, they got into the database, ran their searches, and pulled out all 1.5 million records. And just like that, the heist was over. Okay, now contrast that with the defender's response. The very first red flags were actually raised internally way back on June 11th. That's more than 2 weeks before the data was even stolen. More weird activity was spotted on the 13th. It wasn't until July 4th, the same day the theft was finished, that an admin finally noticed the weird database queries and shut them down. But here's the truly incredible part. Senior management and the national cyber agencies weren't told until July 10th, a 6-day delay, after the data was already gone. So why? Why the massive delay? The report points directly to a very human factor, suggesting a culture of fear played a big part. People were reluctant to escalate the problem because they were worried about what would happen if it turned out to be a false alarm. They were worried about how it would look. And in that hesitation, that critical window of opportunity just slammed shut. So when the dust settled, how did the official inquiry wrap all of this up? Well, they concluded that this whole disaster wasn't because of one single mistake. It was a cascade of failures, all connected. The report really boils it down to failures in 3 main areas. First, people. The staff on the ground saw the clues, but they just didn't have the awareness to realize they were looking at a sophisticated attack. Second, process. The plan for how to respond to an incident was broken. Key people didn't know when to raise the alarm. And third, technology. The system itself had gaping holes that basically made the attacker's job a whole lot easier. And let's look at those technical gaps, because they're pretty eye-opening. There was an unnecessary open connection between servers that acted like a superhighway straight to the database. 2-factor authentication, that extra code you get on your phone, it wasn't mandatory for system admins. And maybe worst of all, there were vulnerabilities that had been found in a security test a full year earlier that had simply not been fixed. And this right here is probably the most damning verdict in the entire report. Despite how sophisticated the attacker was, the committee concluded that this breach was not inevitable. If those basic known issues had been fixed, the story could have had a very different ending. The attackers could have been stopped. But the report wasn't just about what went wrong. It was about creating a blueprint for the future, a defense built on some very, very hard lessons. In total, the Committee of Inquiry laid out 16 detailed recommendations. And this wasn't just about tweaking a few settings. It was a call for a fundamental overhaul of how the nation protects its most critical data. Now, we won't go through all 16, but the big ones really boil down to a few key themes. First, a major mindset shift. Cybersecurity has to be seen as a core business risk for the leadership team, not just some problem for the IT department to solve. Second, beefing up defenses with better tools, much better staff training, and way tighter control over those powerful admin accounts. And finally, you've got to be prepared. Incident response plans can't just be documents sitting on a shelf. They have to be tested over and over again. And that leaves us with this final, pretty chilling thought. The report is a deep dive into one specific breach. Yeah, but the lessons here are universal. If a group like this can operate for almost a year inside such a critical system completely undetected, it forces all of us to ask a much bigger question. What ghosts are lurking in our machines right now, just waiting for their moment?
You know, if someone breaks into your house, you generally know it right away.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, there's a shattered window or, I don't know, a splintered door frame, maybe muddy footprints tracking across the living room carpet.
Right, it's very physical.
Exactly. It's physical, it's visible, and it's immediate. But when you step into the world of cybersecurity, that shattered glass just it completely disappears.
It really does.
You can be robbed blind for months, and when you look at your digital front door, the lock is completely untouched. Everything looks perfectly, terrifyingly normal.
And that invisible nature is really the defining illusion of a modern cyber breach.
Yeah.
We've been conditioned to expect digital alarms to function exactly like physical burglar alarms. But sophisticated intruders, they don't kick the door down.
No, they don't.
They slip in, they hide, and they learn the entire layout of the house before they ever lay a single finger on the safe.
Which brings us to today. Welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we have this massive, heavily detailed source in front of us. It's the public report of the Committee of Inquiry into the 2018 cyber attack on Singhealth's patient database.
A huge document.
Very huge. And our mission today for this deep dive is not just to recount the timeline of a data breach. We are going to unpack the actual mechanisms of how an unprecedented, hyper-sophisticated attack systematically dismantled the defenses of a massive healthcare network.
Right.
And more importantly, I think, we're going to uncover the startling human errors that made it all possible.
And this is an incredibly vital case study for you, the listener, regardless of your industry.
Truly.
Because in our age of constant information overload, understanding the anatomy of this specific attack is crucial. It perfectly illustrates the intersection of advanced technology and, well, basic human oversight.
Yeah, that human element.
Exactly. The most advanced multi-million-dollar firewalls in the world are ultimately configured and managed by people, and people make decisions based on convenience, organizational culture, and sometimes just plain fear.
So to understand the sheer scale of the effort the attackers put in, let's start with the fallout. What exactly did the attackers get away with?
Well, the scale is staggering. I mean, the attack spanned from August 2017 all the way to July 2018.
Almost a whole year.
Right. And over that time, the attackers exfiltrated the demographic records of almost 1.5 million unique patients.
Wow.
We are talking names, national identification numbers, addresses, and dates of birth. And for about 159,000 of those patients, they went even further.
What did they take?
They stole their outpatient medication records.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because 1.5 million people is a massive net to cast.
It is.
But looking at the inquiry report, the attackers weren't actually trying to steal a million random records, were they? They were hunting for something or someone very specific.
Yeah. The massive numbers, while devastating, actually mask the true objective. The attackers repeatedly and specifically targeted the personal and outpatient medication data of one specific individual.
Which was Prime Minister Li Qianlong.
Exactly. They were hunting for what cybersecurity professionals call the crown jewels of the network.
Right, the Singhealth Sunrise Clinical Manager Database, or SCM, as it's abbreviated.
That's the one. It's the central electronic medical record software that holds real-time, highly sensitive patient data.
So if we look at this through the lens of a movie, this is basically an Ocean's 11 style bank heist.
Oh, totally.
The thieves aren't just blasting a hole in the wall and grabbing random stacks of cash from the teller. They spent months quietly tunneling into the vault because they are specifically hunting down the private safety deposit box of the town's mayor.
That's a great way to put it.
And they just happened to grab the bank's entire customer address book on their way out the door, maybe to cover their tracks or maximize their leverage.
What's fascinating here is that this level of specific targeted action defines an advanced persistent threat, or APT.
An APT.
Yeah, this was not a random ransomware attack. Ransomware is often just a numbers game, right? Hackers spray a malicious virus across the internet and pray someone accidentally clicks a link.
Right, just hoping for a quick crypto payout.
Exactly. But this Singhealth incident was entirely different. It was a well-resourced, highly skilled, and incredibly patient group conducting targeted espionage. They had a singular goal, and they possessed custom-built tools to achieve it.
So they know they want the Prime Minister's medical records, which are locked deep inside that SCM database.
Yep.
But that database isn't connected to the public internet. You can't just Google it.
No, absolutely not.
So to even get close to the vault, they need a footprint inside the building. How did they get that first step through the door?
Well, the sources point to the initial entry happening around August 23, 2017.
Okay.
It happened on a standard front office computer, simply referred to in the report as Workstation A.
Just a regular desk computer.
Exactly. The most likely vector was a phishing email. An employee likely clicked a link or opened an attachment they shouldn't have.
Oof. We've all seen those emails.
Right. And from there, the attackers employed a framework created by Lockheed Martin known as the cyber kill chain.
I've seen that term cyber kill chain in the notes. It sounds incredibly dramatic.
It really does.
What does that actually look like in practice?
It's basically a way to map out the stages of a cyber attack, from early reconnaissance all the way to data exfiltration. Think of it as a military operation.
Okay.
You don't just parachute into the target. First, you scout the perimeter. That's reconnaissance. Then you weaponize your payload, deliver it via something like a phishing email, and exploit a vulnerability to get inside.
And once they got inside Workstation A?
Once inside, they establish command and control. They set up a quiet, hidden communication channel back to their own servers on the outside so they could send instructions to the compromised computer.
Wait, if this initial compromise started in August 2017, how on earth did they stay hidden inside a critical healthcare network until July 2018?
It's crazy, right?
Weren't there alarms tripping everywhere? I mean, nearly a year of someone wandering around your most sensitive systems seems completely impossible.
That brings us to a concept called low and slow, lateral movement.
Low and slow.
Yeah. The attackers were stealthy, but they were not completely silent. They just moved so methodically that their actions blended in with normal network traffic.
How does lateral movement actually work, though?
So it's like sneaking into a highly secure hospital disguised as a visitor. Your visitor badge only lets you into the public lobby. That's Workstation A.
Right.
But while you are in the lobby, you quietly pickpocket a janitor to get his physical keys, which lets you into the staff elevator.
Ah.
And once in the elevator, you look over a security guard's shoulder, learn his passcode, and steal a forgotten master key card. You aren't kicking down heavy security doors and setting off alarms.
You're just upgrading your disguise.
Exactly. Upgrading your disguise and your access until the building's own security system thinks you are the hospital administrator.
So they're slowly upgrading their disguise over months. And to do that, they exploited a specific software flaw, right?
Yes. By December 2017, they found an unpatched vulnerability in Microsoft Outlook on that initial workstation.
Just normal Microsoft Outlook.
Yeah, and that vulnerability allowed them to install a publicly available hacking tool. Once they had that deeper access, they deployed customized, highly stealthy malware.
The report calls these R81 and R2, right?
Yes, exactly. Remote access Trojans.
What makes a remote access Trojan different from, a normal computer virus?
Well, a standard virus usually wants to replicate and destroy. It deletes files or crashes the system.
Right, it's noisy.
Very noisy. But a RT does exactly what the name implies. It gives the attacker remote control over the infected computer as if they were physically sitting right at the keyboard.
Oh, wow.
And RE2 and R2 were custom built to evade the specific antivirus software Singhealth was using. They allowed the attackers to execute commands, read memory, and move files entirely in the background.
So to get to the database, They needed a path from that front office workstation all the way to the core servers.
Right.
And this brings us to exactly how they were able to upgrade their disguise so easily. It wasn't just because the attackers were brilliant coders, was it?
No, not at all.
It was because the network architecture essentially handed them the keys.
Absolutely. The attackers mapped the network and realized they needed to get from the user workstations to the intermediate servers. Specifically, Citrix servers located at the Singapore General Hospital, or SGH.
Let's clarify that for a second. What is a Citrix server doing in this context?
Think of a Citrix server as a secure virtual middleman. Hospitals use them so that doctors and nurses can access applications and patient data without actually downloading that sensitive data onto their local laptops or iPads.
Oh, so the data stays safe on the server?
Right. You log into the Citrix server, and it just provides a virtual window into the secure environment.
But the inquiry found a massive structural flaw here. To access the SCM database, which was safely housed in a totally separate, secure cloud environment called hCloud, the attackers exploited an open network connection.
Yes.
This connection linked those older SGH Citrix servers directly to the hCloud database.
It was essentially a direct pipe bridging two completely different security zones. And the reason it existed is the textbook definition of poor cyber hygiene.
Why was it even open?
That connection was left open purely so administrators could use the exact same set of administrative tools for different databases across different locations.
Seriously, just to save time.
Yeah. They didn't want the hassle of managing separate login tools for separate databases. It was a decision based entirely on operational convenience, not technical necessity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Once the attackers found this direct pipe, they still needed the right credentials to use it.
Exactly.
And they managed to compromise a local administrator account on those Citrix servers. And the password for this highly privileged account was literally set to P at SAD.
Capital P. The @ symbol 0 instead of an O.
And it hadn't been changed since 2012.
It's the ultimate failure of basic security policy. But the compromises for convenience went even further than that.
How so?
Well, Singhealth actually had advanced security measures available, like privileged access management, which requires two-factor authentication for administrators.
So like getting a text on your phone.
Right. If you want to log in as an admin, you need a password plus a code sent to your phone.
But the administrators found two-factor authentication annoying.
They did.
So they actively bypassed it using alternative login routes they kept open on those Citrix servers just for themselves. Let's put this into perspective for you listening.
Yeah.
This is like building an impenetrable billion-dollar bank vault with a timed lock, a retinal scanner, and armed guards. But the vault manager finds the retinal scanner irritating when he's carrying a cup of coffee.
Right. Slows them down.
So he secretly hires a contractor to install a normal wooden screen door right next to the vault that opens with the rusty skeleton key, because it's easier to take out the trash.
Exactly.
The attackers didn't need to defeat the retinal scanner. They just found the wooden door and used the skeleton key labeled P at sword.
It perfectly illustrates the eternal war between security and convenience. The technology to secure the network was largely there.
The rules were written down.
Yes, the policies requiring complex passwords and the disabling of dormant accounts were written down in manuals. But human behavior and an overriding desire for operational ease completely undermine the technological fortress.
And that tension between policy and human behavior takes us to perhaps the most shocking part of the entire report.
Oh, this part is wild.
It's a massive organizational failure that happened years before the breach even started. Let's rewind to September 2014 and talk about an employee named Zhao Henan.
So Zhao was an employee working for IHS, which is the central IT agency for the healthcare sector. In 2014, he discovered a massive coding vulnerability in the SCM database application.
The same database they eventually targeted.
Exactly. He found that a user, a medical student, a nurse, anyone with basic access, could manipulate the application to easily gain administrative control of the whole database.
Wait, I'm stuck on something. If you work in IT and you find a critical bug in your own system, you log a ticket, you tell your boss, you patch it.
That's what you should do.
But instead, Zhao inexplicably emails a competitor, Epic Systems. He literally writes to them, there's a loophole where user can gain admin control of the whole database easily.
And he mentions it could lead to a serious medical data leak or a national security threat.
Right. And the competitor, entirely confused as to why they are receiving this, immediately flags the email to the CEO of IHS. Why on earth is Zhao emailing a competitor? What was broken in the culture that made him look outside his own house?
The response from the leadership team really answers that question, and it is deeply revealing. The CEO fired Zhao the very next day.
The next day.
Yeah. They treated the entire incident strictly as a disciplinary issue because he had contacted a competitor.
And what about the bug?
As for the critical software vulnerability he flagged, leadership completely dismissed it as normal programming and a routine way to extract data. It was never formally investigated. It was never fixed.
So what does this all mean? How does an entire executive leadership team look at a glaring, flashing red alert about a vulnerability in their core database and only see a human resources problem?
This raises an important question about how organizations structure their priorities and really the psychological safety of their employees. It highlights the profound danger of organizational silos.
Because they just didn't want to hear it.
Right. The leadership views cybersecurity as an IT nuisance rather than a core business risk. They neutralize the immediate corporate embarrassment, the rogue employee talking to a competitor, but entirely ignore the existential technical threat he had uncovered.
They fired the alarm bell instead of putting out the fire.
That's exactly it. And the tragedy is the inquiry report assesses it is highly probable that this exact unpatched 2014 vulnerability was the final mechanism the attackers used in 2018.
4 years later.
Yes. It allowed them to bypass application controls and obtain the final database credentials they needed to cross the finish line.
And this culture of compartmentalizing security didn't just cause the vulnerability, it actively tripled the response when the attack was finally underway.
It really did.
Because the truth is, the attackers were noticed. They weren't totally invisible the whole time. By June 2018, as they were making their final moves, they started making noise.
The attackers were running into walls trying to figure out how to query the complex SCM database. They were generating error logs. Frontline IT staff actually did notice unauthorized logins and strange bulk SQL queries being run on the database.
Let's translate that. What is a bulk SQL query and why should it trigger an alarm?
Well, think of a standard SQL query, like a highly specific filing cabinet request. Usually a doctor logs in and asks for one specific patient's file. That is a normal query.
Makes sense.
But these attackers were running bulk queries, essentially walking up to the digital filing cabinet and saying, give me every single file on this entire floor.
Right, which is highly suspicious.
Exactly. A database isn't used to handling requests like that from a standard user account, so it generated an error log. The frontline staff saw these massive anomalies.
But it went nowhere fast. The middle management, specifically the Security Incident Response Manager, or SIRM, delayed reporting the incident up the chain.
Yeah, they sat on it.
The front line saw the smoke, but the fire department wasn't called. Why didn't they escalate it immediately?
The inquiry found it was a combination of a mistaken understanding of what legally constituted a security incident and, crucially, a very human fear.
Fear of what?
The incident response manager delayed reporting because he felt that bringing this to executive management would put enormous pressure on him and his team. There was a pervasive fear of looking incompetent or causing a massive corporate panic if it turned out to be a false alarm.
I think everyone listening can relate to this on some level. Everyone has probably clicked "Remind me tomorrow" on a mandatory software update.
Oh, for sure.
Or shared a generic password with a coworker just to get a stressful project done faster. Or hesitated to tell a boss about a mistake because of how the boss might react.
We've all been there.
But this breach is what happens when that exact mundane office behavior scales up to a national security level. If your organizational culture lacks psychological safety, you are vulnerable.
100%.
If your frontline workers are paralyzed by the fear of reporting bad news, then the most expensive state-of-the-art detection technology in the world cannot save you.
The system will fail because the humans operating it are too scared to pull the emergency brake.
Right.
The human element is both the strongest defense and the weakest link. And that reality heavily influenced the recommendations put forward by the Committee of Inquiry when they looked at how to fix this and secure the future.
Let's run through those recommendations, because the committee didn't just hand down a shopping list saying, buy better antivirus software.
No, they didn't.
They called for a comprehensive defense-in-depth approach.
And defense in depth is the fundamental assumption that your perimeter will eventually be breached. You cannot rely entirely on a strong outer wall.
We'll have to assume they're getting in.
Exactly. You must build internal checkpoints. For example, they mandated the implementation of database activity monitoring, or DAM.
How does DAM solve the problems we just talked about?
DAM acts as an automated version of a curious human mind. It sits specifically on the database and watches for behavioral anomalies.
Oh.
It understands that a doctor asking for one file is normal, but an administrative account suddenly asking for 1 million files at 2 a.m. is a bulk query anomaly. It flags and blocks that specific behavior instantly, regardless of whether the user typed in the correct password.
That makes a lot of sense. The committee also demanded the strict, non-negotiable enforcement of two-factor authentication for all administrative access.
Yes.
So no more convenient wooden backdoors for IT staff who find the retinal scanner annoying?
Exactly. They also called for rigorous, formalized patch management. The entire initial foothold on Workstation A was only possible because a known vulnerability in Microsoft Outlook was left unpatched for months.
Just sitting there.
Right. Patch management isn't just a best practice. It is the process of closing the doors that software vendors already know are broken.
And above all, they emphasize drastically improving staff cybersecurity awareness. Because these recommendations aren't just for the IT procurement department. You can't just buy a software package to solve a culture of fear.
You really can't.
It's about fundamentally shifting human behavior. It's about taking audits seriously. When an audit says remove hard-coded passwords like P at sword, it means actually doing it, not just treating it as a checklist to be filed away.
The report makes it abundantly clear. Getting the fundamentals right, basic cyber hygiene, is the only way to build resilience against advanced threats. The true test of a modern organization is whether your internal network architecture and your people can detect, contain, and eradicate the threat before the data is actually lost.
So let's recap this incredibly intense journey. We started with an advanced persistent threat, an incredibly patient and skilled group of attackers who knew exactly what they were looking for.
Yes, very methodical.
They deployed custom malware and used the cyber kill chain to quietly move laterally through a network. They met an unprepared, highly compartmentalized organization that prioritized operational convenience over security protocols.
A bad combination.
And the result was a historic data breach that exposed the private information of 1.5 million people and targeted the Prime Minister.
And we have to remember, the attacker succeeded not through some unstoppable, futuristic hacking magic, but by walking through virtual doors left propped open by human error.
Right.
Weak passwords, unpatched software, ignored warnings, and a corporate culture that punished speaking up.
In our modern world, we all entrust our most private, sensitive data, our health records, our finances, our identities, to massive interconnected databases. We want to believe that the firewalls protecting us are impenetrable walls of code.
But they aren't.
No. As this deep dive shows, the true firewall isn't just code. It's the culture of the people guarding it. It's their willingness to be inconvenienced by a second password prompt. It's their courage to report a strange blip on a screen, even if it might just be a false alarm.
The human factor is inescapable, no matter how advanced the technology becomes.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought to chew on. We spent this whole deep dive looking at how human convenience, human error, and human fear of reporting bad news caused this massive breach. The natural reaction for a lot of companies is to say, humans are the problem, let's automate everything. But as we increasingly turn to fully automated, AI-driven security systems to completely eliminate human error, are we actually creating a brand new vulnerability?
That's a great point.
By removing the human intuition that finally caught those anomalous database queries on July 4th, are we just trading human flaws for algorithmic blind spots?
Because an automated system only looks for what it has been explicitly programmed to see. It might entirely miss the silent, invisible context of an anomaly that only a curious, empowered human mind would question.
If the physical break-in leaves shattered glass, and the cyber break-in leaves nothing but perfect digital silence, well, maybe the only thing that can hear that silence is a human being willing to listen. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.